I don't know if like you have that sticky stuff.
As far as I know, you can. So what details do we now focus on within this passage in relation to book as a whole? Sorry, Sean. Okay. Kobe, what's one thing you like highlighted?
Well, we basically kind of compared the Goose to Murphy.
Okay.
Yeah, we said it first, okay?
You literally did it.
Actually, the group in first period said it first.
Yeah.
And then the group last year in first period said it first.
We said it first,
And then
this time.
probably the group before that. So Kobe, like you mentioned the goose. So like we have the line, I do like that goose flying over the cuckoo's nest. And then certainly goose flying over, like which line specific or what's making you make the connection?
Goose swoops down and plucks you out. I
Okay.
feel like that's representing like the mental mentality of Ron. Like he was before he met Murphy, he was mute. He was trying to be deaf and dumb, and Murphy kind of pushed him out of his shell, I guess.
Okay, so Goose being McMurphy. If I'm going to use the term plucks, you know, since it plucks you out, plucks Chief out of the, what would be a good term then to throw in there?
Insane asylum.
Well, I'm in some ways, yes.
Oh, it plucks him out of him.
You could say shell. I'm thinking more like motif-wise for you folks.
His
with
size.
the rhetorical analysis. Yeah, like fog. You could certainly say makes him bigger,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
so
true.
far as size, but since it mentions about plucking him out, what does he take him out of? You know, probably when he raises his hand, when Chief raises his hand for that second vote that they do for the TV in the World Series, that's when, you know, he kind of says about coming out of the fog. With the EST treatment that he's going through at this point, what is the difference between this one and most of the other ones that he's gone through? He feels that he recovers from this one much quicker, better, sooner than he did with the previous one. So McMurphy certainly seems to kind of help him out with that type of stuff. So Goose kind of being McMurphy, plucking Chief out of the fog, and when it comes to other patients, certainly helping them out as well. Within the storyline, so not necessarily going just within this passage, what would be other things that would kind of reinforce McMurphy being a goose in this case? And I'm thinking more to like earlier parts of the book. Oops. I'm gonna write Bull Goose Lonnie. And when he's asking who's the Bull Goose looniest here in the whole hospital, he basically wants to know who is in charge, who's the one who's in control, who is the leader. And throughout the course of the book, certainly seems that of the patients, at least, McMurphy kind of ends up being the one in charge. Anyone ever have a interaction with an actual goose?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like an embarrassing interaction because those are the best ones.
I mean,
Almost.
sort of. I just kind of like ran away because it tried to like bite me.
It didn't actually get you.
Maybe when I was, maybe once it like bit my finger, or maybe it was my brother that I'm thinking of. He like ran
My
away
middle
crying.
brother, the obnoxious millionaire with a mullet, he got bit by a goose.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, actually he's not obnoxious.
This wasn't
He's rich.
When he has a mullet, that's the more permanent
This wasn't me.
Doesn't matter. Why does he
I
have a
was
mullet?
like at this lake and this girl was being so weird. She was like picking up ducks and geese and she picked up this goose.
Don't do
She
that.
was like, look at this! And then the like thing just came back and bit her nose. It was so funny.
Was she okay?
Yeah. It hurts.
So,
Try to get bit.
describe a goose. I don't mean physically, but what would be like traits? So it could attack or dangerous.
Crabs everywhere. Am I wrong?
Sound-wise, they are
Wow.
loud, obnoxious. You know, and you could go with like dangerous, irritating, attacking. Certainly synonyms could kind of come up with that. Really? Dangerous, loud, obnoxious? That sounds an awful lot like McMurphy.
Like me.
Goose swoops down, plucks you out. The line before that, one flew east, one flew west, one flew over the cuckoo's nest. Anything with those lines or lines?
That could represent the acutes, the chronics, and then McMurphy.
Okay, so like the three different categories that would be taking place. Okay, so acutes, chronics, McMurphy. Anything else? Acutes, chronics, Randall, Patrick, McMurphy. What's the nest? Okay. So if we have the nest as the hospital, which is where McMurphy is, what could be another thing with east, west? Since he's plucking you out.
Sanity and insanity.
I'm even just thinking like movement. I mean, we don't know who goes east or who goes west, but what happens to Chief? He leaves. And then you have Harding, Seafeld, Fredrickson. One flew east, one flew west, one flew over the cuckoo's nest. The one who's still in the cuckoo's nest, McMurphy, since we said hospital. And then you have Chief going one way, Harding and the group going another way by the end of the book, since they are checking themselves out. O-U-T spells out, out, out. How about hens? Since we're looking at animals, patience for hens?
She's a good fisherman, is like the nurse.
Okay.
I saw that there's like she's a good fisherman and then like describing her.
And similar to like the bull goose loony, what would be a pretty good scene that would kind of add more evidence of hens and patience?
Wasn't that around the same place when like McMurphy was saying that their patients he was comparing them to something and then Harding was like, no, we're rabbits.
Right? You remember what? Chickens, because he says this is all one big pecking party.
Yeah.
Where they nip at one another. And it's Bull Goose Looney is when he first comes in and he's introducing himself. But after he sees the first quote-unquote therapeutic session that takes place, Harding's basically getting, I don't want to say attacked by the other patients, but they are certainly making him kind of feel inadequate and whatnot. And that's when McMurphy kind of starts comparing them to chickens. So the whole idea about them being chickens, she being a good fisherman, put them in pens. No, she doesn't necessarily lock them up in cages or pens, but they are still trapped within the hospital walls itself. And you add on to it then that when Chief goes, I like the game, I like Grandma, I don't like Mrs. Tingle Tangletoes catching hens, well, you would think therefore he does not like Big Nurse, who would be catching all of the patients and keeping them locked up. Anything about Tingle Tangletoes? Anyone make any?
I thought that might be like the nurse and how she like the feeling of like the electric shock treatment, like for like
Yeah.
shocks you.
Like you could kind of think of it as pins and needles for like, I feel kind of tingly, but at the same time, don't go home and lick a 9-volt battery or, stick your finger in the socket, but you get a little jolt of electricity, there's going to be a little kind of tingle going on with it. So at least that whole idea of, DES heat treatments, I think would make sense.
There's like any mention of the fisherman, does that have any, like, I don't know if it have reference to the fishing trip or not.
Well, this one would, it wouldn't seem so because they go on the fishing trip where it's a good thing. And really, why does it end up being good? You know, we talked about the goose. How would you describe it? It's loud. They kind of have like a loud squall about them. And the patients end up kind of getting a loud laughter about it, where the fishing trip ends up being a good thing. For here, her being a good fisherman, no, but you certainly do continue to get these references. You know, Alice be a fisher of men. They go out on this fishing trip. You have this reference here. So it's something that he does kind of keep bringing up. I would say, if anything, the two juxtapose one another. And I'm not trying to certainly force this upon anyone, but juxtaposition can end up being a pretty helpful rhetorical device to use, especially if you're looking at something along the lines of contrast or change that's happened within patients. How one trait can kind of juxtapose another, and it can emphasize it somewhat. So by McMurphy acting the way that he does, his behavior is truly emphasized because none of the other patients have that same behavior. So the two of those ideas, juxtapose themselves quite a bit. But Kesey does a lot of juxtaposition throughout. We're putting similar concepts together, but having a pretty separate, different reaction from it. So yeah, tingle, tangle toes, the EST, the tinging that would go along with that, flying east, flying west, all those things would be, it's a pretty good review, really, of everything that kind of happens within the course of the book. Within here, since we're talking about devices, certainly it would reinforce you're getting a lot of animal imagery or animal motif, if you wanted to kind of think of it that way. Goose, the fishing, the chickens, the rabbits, the wolves. So certainly some animal comparisons are a pretty dominant trait that gets used throughout the book. Anything else with the passage? That's a pretty good rundown of everything. On the back of the syllabus, where you see the themes, what would be ones that you look at and go, please don't ask me that.
Are you going to give us that one?
No.
Do you already have it?
Good about.
I already have prompts. No, I don't know what's going to period 1, period 2, well, period 1, period 7.
Human dignity.
Hearing hero, anti-hero. Ali, you said human dignity?
Yeah.
Okay. Any others?
What do you mean by definition of sane and insane? Do you mean how the book defines it?
Not looking so much for like a definition that would appear within the book, but kind of how does society end up defining it? I mean, for someone to end up in the mental hospital, or for someone to feel like they should be in the mental hospital, you have a sense of something's wrong with me, so therefore I must not be sane. That in itself, you could kind of end up going with like an irony, for example, that you could argue the patients are the sanest ones, the ones who are in control, are those who are insane. So you're not going to, it's not going to turn into a DRQ. Is this an appropriate definition of sane or insane, or like a synthesis? But how, think of these two could be in conflict with one another, how Kesey would bring that up would be something to look at. All right, certainly not within the course of 7-8 minutes are we going to go through all of these. Let's start with human dignity, and then this could kind of branch out into some other areas. Ali, you mentioned it. I'm not worried about rhetorical devices, but what would be, and not that you have to answer this all on your own, what would be scenes that you can think of where there is a lack of human dignity expressed, or what would be scenes where it starts to maybe come to fruition?
When the nurse starts to shame Billy.
At the end.
At the end.
Okay. Kobe, what were you going to say?
Pecking party.
Okay.
Discuss
So the shaming of Billy, the whole pecking party. Okay. Anybody else?
Like how some of the chronics are like Ellis, or like how they act and how they
I mean, Ellis is on the wall, basically unable to move at all. And when it comes to human dignity, and this kind of combining, I guess, Billy and some others, you have the shaming of Billy, which leads to a suicide. You have Rawler. You have Cheswick, where you could argue that by them feeling a lack of dignity and worth, that therefore they take the actions that they do. Cheswick's one where you could also argue that he kind of has an action where he tries to gain dignity before he takes that, when he kind of has his big stand about his cigarettes, and then McMurphy's not there to back him up and he kind of wilts away a little bit. Any other times where dignity is gained? Sure. When he's made the decision that he's going to go on the fishing trip, and they bring the broom to him. Sure. Kobe, did you?
Oh, I was just also going to say regarding Chief, when you receive the pulled himself out of the fog. Almost.
I'm sorry. When he
Like almost rolled himself out of the fog.
after the passage that we kind of have here. Okay. Yeah. Wills himself out of the fog. Sean.
I was gonna say just like them being able to go on the fishing trip all together, like being able to get the second car and everything, and just like working together to have it happen.
Well, and what's Harding's line at the gas station to McMurphy? I never realized that my quote-unquote disability has some power to it. Because, I mean, they're going to overcharge him for gas and do things to the car that they don't necessarily need. And then you have McMurphy going, wait a minute, do you really want to mess with? We're nuts. We're liable to do absolutely anything. And then all of a sudden, they're puffing out their chest a little bit and acting differently. And then you go back to the dock, where now they don't feel so powerful anymore because they're kind of out of their element, where that dignity kind of goes away. So there's an ebb and flow to it. But the fishing trip is one where you can certainly see that they kind of start to build it up. And the fact that they're able to laugh about it, by the end of the fishing trip, and George can park the boat, and then the guys at the dock are, impressed with the way George can handle the boat, and everyone else, there's some dignity certainly being gained there. So yeah, the fishing trip in general, but specifically things like the gas station, the dock, the laughter that they kind of start to gain, those would be some things that you could look at. So say you do have a question dealing with dignity, what you would want to do, or the importance of human dignity, whether it be present or absent, you can start thinking of scenes where, okay, dignity downplays a part. For any of those, and certainly we'll continue to pick up with this tomorrow, what would be some devices that start to go along with those? That's where we'll start. And not on tomorrow, but it'll be on Wednesday when we have a full team again.